Welcome to Granite's Edge, a Republican-led legislative action program bringing information to our residents of Pelham and New Hampshire. News about legislation that's happening right now in our state capital of Concord that will affect you. Why are we called Granite's Edge? Our small town of Pelham, New Hampshire is located on the southern border of our wonderful Granite State, so we're right on the edge. And as all of you know, that edge is exactly what we have over others. Granite's Edge. In this program, we'll take a dive into some of the most important legislation of this session. We'll talk to legislators about the challenges in our state and about the committees they serve on. And every month, we'll have a special guest, someone who's an expert in their field who will bring you the truth about important topics that are linked to important legislation that may affect your liberty and freedom. Your host today is Herschel Nunez, an elected state representative right here from Pelham, New Hampshire, who thinks it's important that you know what the legislators know. So stay tuned. We have a great show for you today.
Hello and welcome back to Granite's Edge. It's been a long time since we've seen all you guys, or since you've seen us. As we've moved through the health crisis that's come to the nation and into our state, we've not been able to come back to our wonderful town hall of Pelham here and give you any legislative updates. However, we're back in action, and I'm glad that we're back in action because today I have a very, very special guest. Today with me is the Republican leader, Mr. Dick Hinch, representative from Merrimack. Dick, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
I am thrilled to have you on our program today. We have been working together for a couple of years now. I met you in the candidate season in 2018.
Right.
The way we met was sort of indirect. I was invited to sit at your table at the Lincoln-Reagan dinner, and you weren't able to go. So I sat at your table, but you weren't there.
So you replaced me.
There were several people that were there. I was with all the ladies that make trouble.
Yes, I know them well.
Yes, they're all wonderful ladies. And a few other folks that were at the table. We had a wonderful time, and I really appreciated being able to sit at the table and go to that dinner. Although I was looking very much forward to meeting you, it didn't happen. But I did get to meet you later on.
Yes.
Of course, you won your election, I won my election. You became the leader of the Republican Party, and your official title is Republican Leader.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Well, why don't you do me a favor and say a few things to us about you and where you're from, and so that people can get to know you just a little bit.
Okay. Thank you. So, as you said, I'm from Merrimack, which is District 21, Hillsborough County. I've been in the House now. I'm finishing my 6th term, heading into the 7th, if God willing, the residents of Merrimack vote me in again. And I was the majority leader for 3 years. I was the majority whip for the year before that. And then for the last 2 years, I've been the Republican leader, also known as minority leader. But I don't like the word minority leader. I like Republican leader, and
I know that we all went through a change on that.
Yes.
We all agreed that it should be Republican leader.
That's right. That's right.
And I like that better too.
Yes, and it is at both sides. You know, when the Democrats are in the minority, they do the same thing.
They'll be the Democrat leader.
Democrat leader.
Yep.
And, So.
And we've gone through a couple of years here of tough bills and tough situations in the House.
Yes.
But I don't think that anything came up as tough as what we faced this year. Now, you're a guy that originally came from Marblehead, Massachusetts, is that right?
That's right.
Went to college down at Salem State.
Salem State, and North Shore.
North Shore Community College, right?
Beverly, yes.
And when did you move to New Hampshire, and when did you decide to get into politics?
So I moved to New Hampshire 26 years ago, and I actually started off in politics in the town of Merrimack on the Budget Committee, and I served as the Vice Chairman of the Budget Committee. And I also was on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And then I became a selectman, and I was actually the chairman of the Board of Selectmen for 3 years. Got off the Board of Selectmen, and Maureen Mooney, who had served, I think, 3 terms in the House, maybe 4, was coming off and going on to a new venture. And so she reached out to me and said, would you like to run in my stead, representing Merrimack? And I said, sure. And so I was elected, and interestingly enough, Maureen is going to be coming back this year.
Oh,
So,
how nice.
Yeah, yep.
How nice.
So, yeah.
I know everybody will look forward to that.
Yes. Yep.
So in the whole tenure that you've been in the legislature, have you been faced with the situation that we've been faced with this year? And I'm talking about not just about us being in the minority or having to deal with, whatever kind of bills we have to deal with, but we actually ran into a health crisis this year.
Yes, we did. Yep. And actually, before that, the larger question is when Republicans were in the majority, and when I was the majority leader serves at the pleasure of the Speaker, there wasn't as much animosity between, Republicans and Democrats. We treated them with a great deal of respect. I stopped by the Democratic office every single day, every day without failure, and said hello to everybody and just went on my merry way. But I wanted to make sure that I was reaching out. The same hasn't happened.
It's been a difficult couple of years. Yeah.
It has.
Yeah.
It has. And there, even the composition of the Democrats has changed, and there's a lot more infighting within their caucus, and there's a lot more struggles, if you will, that they have to control as well. I'm fortunate. I assembled a great leadership team.
Yes, you did.
It was, and no one does it on their own. The successes of this year are not Dick Hinch. The successes are a team effort that came about, and I call them the, sometimes I call them the Crazy Seven, sometimes I call them the Magnificent Seven, but we have a great leadership team, and I made sure that I reached all of the different segments, if you will, of our caucus to make sure everybody had a voice and a seat and an important part at the table.
I think that the Republican caucus appreciated the fact that everybody was represented.
Yep.
Whether you were more of a mainstream Republican establishment, or if you were a moderate that sits closer to the left,
Yep.
or if you were a person who believed in liberty and freedom first, or whatever that was, if you were the conservative, ultra-religious right, everybody was represented at the table.
Yep.
And that was, I think it worked very well.
Yeah.
It worked very well.
Yeah. It's a great team. I'm blessed to have each and every one of them, and they all do different things, and they bring different qualities and different voices to the table. And as you know from sitting in caucus, I wanted to make sure the caucus felt like it was a family, and there wasn't infighting. Well, of course, there's fights in families. We discuss things.
Sometimes we get heated a little bit, but it's because everybody has passion about what they're doing.
Exactly.
It's not because anybody's mad at another person.
No.
It's just because they're trying to prove a point.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. And as you know, any positions that we took, I really put it out to the caucus and said, okay, tell us how you feel. And on a number of occasions, we took votes to see, are we all together on this? Are we marching in the same direction? And so, and that's an important aspect of what we've done this year. Now, your original question was what happened on March 11th and 12th.
Yeah. Let's get into that.
Yeah.
While we've gone through this entire term for the past year and a half to almost 2 years now, while we all learned a lot and we all stuck together.
Yes.
I mean, there was an amazing Republican caucus.
Yes.
We ran into this health crisis.
Yes.
this COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that some of our viewers out there may have some confusion as to why the steps were taken to close down the legislature, the procedures that we had to go through, not only to allow the time away, but to plan for the time to come back and how we were able to come back.
Right.
So I want to take us back to March 11th and 12th when all the decisions were being made.
Right.
We had a very grueling last day. I believe we were there until 4 o'clock in the morning.
We were.
Getting through all of the work that had been bottlenecked up,
Yep.
that had not been delivered to the House,
Right.
that we fought to have the bills reviewed and heard in the House so that our constituents would know that we were not pushing the work of the people off to the side.
That's right.
Now,
Yep.
we had to do a suspension of the rules. And I want to start into this here. We were at lunch, and it was a late lunch, or late
Yep.
dinner.
Yes.
It was a late dinner. We were at dinner, and we left the chamber, and we went down to the cafeteria,
Yep.
and we sort of shut all the doors up, and we had a caucus.
Right.
And yourself and the other leadership members were there.
Right.
And you made an announcement to us and said, we need to vote on suspending the rules.
Right.
Now, tell me, so that they'll understand, tell me why we needed to suspend the rules.
Yep. So during the day, as you probably saw, there was a steady path that I was walking to meet with the speaker. He and I probably met, 6, 8 times during the day. And in the beginning, it was to explain that there was this very real possibility, like 98% likelihood that we were going to have to close down the legislature, within the next several days, which in fact did happen. And so in order to deal with the exiting from the session that we were in, but also an entry back in an orderly fashion, it required a suspension of rules. And so the House is run by rules. The rules are established by us as legislators.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, the rules, when they're established, are actually done by a majority vote. So establishing rules, you can really, if you take advantage of the situation or make it an advantage to your side, it can become a problem because it is a majority vote. So those in the majority can prevail. But when you do a suspension of the rules, that means that now the level is much higher, and it requires 2/3 present and voting.
Where a simple majority is 50% plus 1.
50% plus 1,
Right.
present and voting. And that the present and voting is an interesting anomaly, because even though there are 400 members of the House, on any given day, there isn't 400 people present for session.
Right.
It is not abnormal to have 15, 20, 30 people out for various reasons. It can be important business, it can be sickness, it can be death in the family, a number of excused absences. So it's present and voting. So to suspend the rules, it takes 2/3 present and voting. So the majority party can't do it by themselves.
That's right.
They have to come to the minority
Unless
party.
they have a supermajority, but that is not what we have in our House right now.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah.
And so the only time the minority is even able to perform certain ways with parliamentary procedure without getting overly complicated is when you have the need for a 2/3 vote. And then they have to come to the minority to get us to embrace what needs to be done.
Now,
So
now you guys, your leadership team and the Democratic leadership team with the Speaker all got together to talk about the impending crisis that we were going to be going through.
That's right.
Okay.
And during that meeting, and it started off with just myself and Sherm Packard. Sherm is the deputy Republican leader. So it was just the two of us in that meeting. And then coincidentally, you have to include the Senate in the conversation as well, because now you're talking about the general court. And the general court is both the House and the Senate, okay? Mm-hmm. Executive is to the side. And so we met and thrashed around the scenario, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then I got called into a meeting with the Senate leadership, and I made it crystal clear to both the Senate leadership and the House leadership that the only way I was going to agree to suspend the rules and convince my caucus to do that was under certain conditions, because I wanted to make sure that the minority views were represented as we exited and as we entered again. So the language was crafted that said that the schedule would be the new schedule would be adopted with the consent of the Republican leader, the minority leader. Mm-hmm. They couldn't do it willy-nilly on their own. And that was very important because that verbiage was not in the Senate version. What was in the Senate version was a little different. It was with the advice of the Republican Senate leader. It was not with.
Does that cause a conflict? When
they were able
the
to,
Senate has their own thing. They have their own things going on.
Oh yeah.
We have our own thing that's going on.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the Senate works under totally different rules than the House, and we have a lot more restrictions, if you will, with our rules than the Senate does, and that's just the way it's always been.
Yep.
So I made sure they included in there that it was under the advice and consent of the minority, and so everybody said okay, and shook hands and kumbaya and all that. Mm-hmm. So then I presented it to the rest of the leadership team, and then we all, as you know, came down and presented it to the caucus. There were a number of questions from the caucus. Why are we doing this? What happens if they don't live up to their promise? Mm-hmm. Things like that.
Yes.
And it was my job to think of it on the positive side, even though I had some apprehension. Mm-hmm. You have to think on the positive side that people are honorable.
And I believe that many people had a few doubts, but we also had to understand, I believe, that there was a pending health crisis that could come.
That's right.
And it did come.
And it did come.
Yeah.
And we were, interestingly enough, when we came out of session, as you know, on the morning of Friday the 13th.
Yes.
Because we were in session Wednesday, Thursday.
That's
didn't
right.
come out until 4 a.m. on the morning of Friday the 13th. That's a day to remember.
Yes.
2 days later, then all of a sudden the crisis was at a point where, in fact, the legislature and the state was subjected to the stay-at-home order, and a number of executive orders then followed. So now you have the legislature, both House and Senate, is out of session. Mm-hmm. During that time, the expectation was that there would be a very, very aggressive interfacing between the Speaker and the Democratic leadership team and the Republicans, because that was the agreement.
Right.
Well, that didn't happen. I would, ask Sherm because he did the majority of the interfacing with the Speaker, and I would ask him to check with the Speaker and find out when he's going to do this or when he's going to do that or how we're going to do this, and he would have, a very brief conversation, and the Speaker would say, I don't know. I haven't talked to the Senate President yet. And that went on for days and days and days and days. And I said, okay, wait a minute. Something's wrong here. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to establish a schedule where we're able to properly vet the bills that have come before us. Because the expectation from our constituents is that the legislature is still going to attend and vet and act upon every bill. And so it's like, how are we going to do this? And then there was the different conversations about, remote public hearings and remote sessions and things like that.
But
Well,
that didn't come until a few weeks later.
That's right.
After we were out for possibly a month.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And during that time, my frustration level grew. I mean, I
can imagine.
Yeah, I just about had it because, representatives like you and others were calling me saying, "Hey, Dick, what's going on? When are we going back? How are we going to do this?" It's like, I don't know. And that's, I don't know is a terrible answer to give to a legislator. And so, we tried to navigate through the whole thing and figure it out. And it just, as it came to pass, we were under the realization that they weren't going to live up to their agreement, that there was not the participation, with the, with both leadership teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was a phone call here and there that happened between Sherm and the speaker, yes. But then there was supposed to be, even a, and this gets a little complicated, but there was supposed to have been an exchange of thoughts from the ranking members and the committee chairs of what bills would be of a priority nature and should be brought forward and handled and things like that. And that happened only to a very minor degree. There's 22 committees, and candidly, there was 10 committee chairs that reached out and said, I'm going to recommend that these bills go forward, et cetera, et cetera. Others asked for advice. It really varied.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes it was based upon a relationship that had been established for years working together and in a collegiate fashion. And for others, the other 10 committees, there was no communication at all.
Oh,
and I put a press release out and called them out on it.
Yep.
And the day after the press release came out, all of a sudden, 6 more chairs reached out.
That's the way it works.
That's the way
Put
it
a little
works.
pressure on them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, of course, they're trying to throw it all on Republicans and saying we're obstructionists and all this, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. We're not trying to obstruct. We're trying to live up to what the agreement was. What is wrong with that?
The agreement, from the way that I understand it, from what you said, is that the two sides should have been working together to create
Correct.
and establish the schedule that would be developed throughout the time away to give us entry back into the legislature when everything cooled off.
That's correct. Absolutely correct. And that schedule includes public hearings, because the public gets an opportunity to come in and to voice either their support or their non-support for legislation and tell us, where they're at with it, where the warts are, if you will.
This is part of the rules.
Part of the rules.
Part of the rules says that the House creates bills, and here's the bills. The Senate creates bills, and here's the bills. And then we have a crossover point where the Senate's bills come to the House and the House bills go to the Senate.
Correct.
And during all of this process, it's done so that each side of the legislature can have public input to help those committee members determine how they feel about those bills that come through their committee.
That is
to
correct.
Send the type of notification to either the House or the Senate on what has happened with the bill inside committee. Should it be spoken to on the floor? Is it going to go on the consent calendar?
Yep.
Has it basically been killed, or is there going to be a debate?
Yep.
And we have to plan for all those things.
That's right. That's right. And the public hearing process, and I should backtrack a little bit by saying every piece of legislation gets a public hearing in both the House and the Senate if it's brought forward by the body. And that was the other problem, because we reached crossover for House bills, which is the time that now you load these bills onto the train and they take a ride to the Senate.
Right.
The Senate was doing the same thing. Well, the Senate still had 26 bills that they had to deal with. We had finished most all of the House bills. I think there was just a couple left to go. And so, but now it's like, how do you act upon those Senate bills to come over and establish a schedule now for public hearings and for what's called the exec session, which is when the committees now deliberate the merits of the bill and vote. And then you have the House session where all of the bills are acted upon. And even if a committee recommended killing a bill, the House still has to adopt that recommendation or flip that recommendation.
Right.
So every piece of legislation gets a public hearing, gets an exec session, and gets some sort of action in the House.
On both sides of the legislature.
On both sides. Well,
That's not exactly how it worked out this year, though.
Right. If it's a House bill and it's killed by the full House after public hearing and exec
Then
session,
it doesn't go over.
it doesn't go over.
Right.
Okay, that's it. You put a fork in
And
it.
same with them.
That is correct.
Same with them.
So we come to this point where, okay, now we have to have a meeting of the minds between the Senate and the House. We didn't have a voice in that because it was done by the majority. And
Who made an agreement that we would be sitting at the table for those decisions.
That's correct.
But they sort of cut us out of that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so that's where the quote omnibus bills came from. So Christmas tree, whatever nomenclature you want to use.
Load it up.
And so you can take, and it's perfectly within the rules to do it, but you can take a bill, and the other body is in the possession of that bill, and they can put other bill under other language from other bills on it, calling it an amendment.
Yes.
And then it comes over, and now all of a sudden you have a singular bill, and all of a sudden there's
That might have been
26 bills.
It might have been a page and a half long, and now it's 150 pages long.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
And we didn't get to see them.
That's correct.
Yes.
And that's correct. And so the Senate bills that were attached, the House bills that they attached them to, we saw and acted upon. But the Senate bills themselves did not have a public hearing or an exec session in the House.
Now
They did in the Senate.
Let's talk more about these last two sessions that we had in June.
Yeah.
But I want to lead up to that, because with the new restrictions, with the new restrictions that were placed not only on businesses but also on the state and the legislature, we had restrictions placed on us as well.
Right.
We could no longer meet in the House chamber because it wasn't considered safe for all of us to be sitting next to each other the way that we sit next to each other, auditorium style.
That's correct. And as a matter of fact, we couldn't even sit in committee rooms to have public hearings because of the lack of social distancing and precautions that way. So we were unable to have public hearings because there was no venue that the majority came up with. I have my different thoughts about that.
I had a few thoughts about how it could have been handled as well.
Yes.
Now, if this ever happens again, let's get together. I think we can work it out.
Yes. I mean, committee hearings could have been done socially distant. You can do it in the Representatives Hall.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So that was a lame excuse. But anyway, having said that, so the legislature was at a standstill. For months. We could not operate. Then people were saying, why can't you operate? Well, we couldn't operate because we were under the restrictions
of the emergency orders.
Of the emergency orders.
That's right.
That's correct. So then finally, it was determined that we could meet in the Whittemore Center at UNH as a legislative body of the House and be able to do it on the floor of the rink and still be able to be socially distant and have all the protections and stuff like that. And so that's when we fast forward up to June 11th.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the Senate, which is composed of 24 members, they could meet in our chamber,
Yep.
Reps Hall, and still be very much socially distant and have all of the appropriate safety precautions and things like that. And so they did. So they met in Reps Hall, and we met at the Whittemore Center. But then, because they did not live up to their end of the agreement, there was a suspension of the rules once again that was necessary. And Republicans, rightly so, said, wait a minute, you didn't make us part of the process, and now you're expecting us to just, go along to come along, and we're not going to do that. We looked forward to a level of participation that didn't happen.
Right.
And so, once again, we were accused of being obstructionists.
Obstructionists, yeah.
And they loved that label. And so, the bills that we weren't able to act on to finalize crossover, which was, as I said, the 23 bills that were House bills that were remaining, they ended up not being acted upon that day because we didn't adopt the schedule. Because the schedule, when you suspend the rules, and it gets a little complicated, but the schedule now says that you're going to establish a cutoff for public hearings, exec sessions, and you're going to waive all of that as well too. And so we
voted not to suspend the rules.
We voted not to suspend the rules. We stood our ground. It was the right thing to do.
I believe it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because of the history of this term.
Right.
Not just because of I'm not going to blame it on just because of the lack of participation that they should have offered to our party during the restructuring of how the legislative sessions would continue, but because of many, many other items that had happened during the term. I brought all of that into consideration for my vote. There are other times where we needed to suspend the rules that we didn't like what happened. So if I saw a pattern of them saying one thing and not doing it, and when this last time, when March 11th and 12th happened, when we went through all of those bills that we could have heard previously that they bottlenecked into the last days before crossover, it was very bad management. When we got to there and we suspended the rules that one last time, and we all knew that there was a health crisis that was coming, and that there was a very big possibility that we were going to get shut down anyway, so we needed to take care of business. This is actual business, house business, housekeeping that needed to happen in order for us to be able to come back. Now, when we got back to our last session, which was on June the 30th,
Right.
the only thing that we could hear was the concurrent bills.
Correct.
Because we did not suspend the rules on our June 11th session.
Correct.
Okay.
So there are, as part of the rules, there are deadlines to have public hearings and act upon bills. We didn't suspend the rules. We didn't agree to suspend the rules. So the only action we were then able to take was what's called concurrences. Concurrences don't have a deadline to them. You can have a concurrence come up in September. So the Democrats used that opportunity to just decorate the Christmas tree and put all sorts of bills that we hadn't acted upon onto a bill that we had acted upon, therefore as an amendment, And that goes back to your original comment about a 2-page bill turned into a 120-page bill.
Right.
And that then becomes a concurrence. Well, a concurrence is simple majority vote. It's not 2/3. There is no suspension of the rules. It's just a simple majority vote. So they just rammed through all of these bills that had the omnibus bills attached to them. It was a concurrence, so whatever the majority wanted, they got.
Now, they can do this, interrupting
Yes.
you, they can do this because their Senate Rule 317 says that as long as they've heard the bill in the Senate and have had an ought to pass on that bill, they can add it as an amendment to any bill that's being sent back to the House.
Absolutely correct. That's
And
right. Yes.
a lot of our fellow representatives, our colleagues, people that we trust very much and admire very much, had questions about constitutionality of this process.
Yep.
And I contacted you,
Right.
and also contacted the clerk of the House.
Yep.
And you guys gave me some really great information.
Yep.
And what's been determined here, I think through the discussions with you, is that none of it was unconstitutional. None of the proceedings were unconstitutional.
Correct.
Because we followed our House rules and the Senate followed their House rules.
Correct.
And through their House rule, through their rules, they can send to us what their rules say they can send to us.
That's correct.
And we either like it or we don't.
Right. And that's absolutely right. And this is not new. It's been going on for years and years and years and years. The Senate produces and lives by their own rules. The House lives by its own rules. The House rules and the Senate rules do not have to be in sync. They can be very much opposite. The only difference that we ran into was that the presiding officers agreed to the fact that there would be no committee of conference. And a committee of conference is a scheduled event that happens when there's a difference between the language of the House bill and that of the Senate bill, because they may have amended it along the way. And then you go to a committee of conference and you navigate through that and
Sort of working out the differences.
you work out the details.
And then you bring it back.
Right. That didn't happen.
And that's because the presiding officers have the ability to make that determination.
That's correct. That's right.
So without having
Again, because, not to interrupt you,
Yep.
because concurrences don't follow a prescribed schedule that's established by rule.
Okay, so one more question about the constitutionality
Yep.
efforts in this. Because we did not agree to suspend the rules, there was no way for a schedule to be built or pushed out
Right.
to make hearings for the bills that were being sent over to us.
That's correct.
So when we had colleagues from either side thinking that the proceedings may have been unconstitutional, we followed the results of the proceedings in the House chamber, which was at the Whittemore Arena.
Right.
We followed the way the House rules work. We did exactly what we were supposed to do, and then
past
followed the
practice.
results of that, and it was all 100% constitutional.
And past practice.
And past practice.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, it was. And there may have been there were some that thought that it was unconstitutional, but it wasn't. And, House rules are very defined in, what you're able to do, and past practice helps to define that as well, too.
Yes.
So,
Yes. And also, I don't know if a lot of people understand this, but House rules also sit aside from statute.
Mhm.
Our rules cover the way we operate, not
Correct.
statute.
Correct.
Statute falls down in the list.
Yeah.
There are many components that we have to look at in order to understand how the House operates, and we don't have to go into all that. That's another
Right.
complete program in
Yes.
itself. But our House rules are run aside from statute.
Correct.
We're not breaking any laws or RSAs by not having a hearing because we didn't suspend the rules. And we didn't suspend the rules because we didn't know what they were going to do.
Right.
Because of the history
Right.
that we'd been through with them already for the whole term.
That's correct. That's
So-
right. Yep. The legislature establishes its own rules. That's the most important part of the conversation. We are able to establish whatever rules the majority, it's majority again, determines by vote to run the operation of the legislature. You can't run afoul of the Constitution or statute, but and someone will say, well, let's bring it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court or the Superior Court is not going to review a general court, which is what the legislature determination, because they've already said they have their own rules, so it holds up that way, and
Precedent means something.
precedent means something, absolutely. Yep.
Now we got through our last session,
Yes, we
and
did.
we lost the vote on every one of the omnibus bills.
Yes.
There were some Republicans that voted for some of the omnibus bills
Yes.
for different reasons.
Yes.
A lot of Republicans didn't vote for anything because they were omnibus-style bills, and we had not had the opportunity to review any of it.
That's correct.
Now,
And those who voted either way with that, in my opinion, were not wrong with their vote. If you voted for an omnibus bill because it had a section or an influence upon your town, and you therefore now are voting for your constituents,
Yes.
and to represent them properly as you should. And there were some that said, okay, I'm not going to do any of the omnibus bills just because, and it was the principle of it, and that's not an inappropriate stance either.
that's not inappropriate. Yep.
Right, right.
Yep. And we support each other in the votes that we take.
Right.
We don't always agree with each other. In either side of the legislature, in either caucus, we don't always agree with each other.
Right.
But we still shake hands and come back and work with each other the next day.
That's right.
Because we have the work of the people at hand, and we have to get that done.
That's right.
Now we got through our June 30th session, and at the end of the day that day, that was our last regular session day.
That's correct. We have recessed to the call of the chair in both the House and the Senate. And so the presiding officer can call us back at any time, and the most pressing part will be to deal with the vetoes, which will be coming.
They will be coming.
Yes. So there'll be a veto day or days coming up. It'll probably be day in the fall. I'm going to guess it's going to be the week after the primary election. So it's going to be somewhere around the 12th, 13th, 14th of September, something.
They're going to
like
give
that.
us all time to campaign.
Yeah, they're going to give us time to campaign. And then there'll be a veto day. And so the uniqueness of the veto day is, again, we've been recessed to the call of the chair. We have not been adjourned. So, and that's a very important distinction, because if you adjourn, then certain activities can't happen.
Is dead.
Right.
Yep.
So along the way, they're enrolling bills that we have acted upon, and they'll go to the governor for his signature or his veto. It will, and if he signs it into law, it becomes law upon the effective date of that legislation. And then the vetoes will be coming up on what we call the veto day. And the majority of vetoes, interestingly enough, are going to be starting in the House. Because if the bill that's being vetoed is a House bill. It starts in the House.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a Senate bill, it starts in the Senate. Interestingly enough, the House bills that the Senate put all of these amendments on, which were Senate bills, are now part of a House bill. So that whole,
that could all get vetoed.
that whole Murphy's Chowder.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That whole Christmas tree
That whole
is going to
Christmas-
catch on fire.
That's correct. and so that will come for veto day. And so vetoes, you need 2/3 present voting to overturn the governor's veto. So if you don't get the 2/3, then the veto is sustained.
And our party has done a very good job.
Yes.
During the first year of the term, we stuck together really well.
Right.
There were a couple of bills that were two that had some different thoughts from some different members.
Yes.
And there were a couple of overrides that did happen.
Right.
But for 98% of the bills, our caucus stuck together.
Right.
And we were able to sustain the vetoes with the governor.
That's right.
Now
He
we
did
look
57, and we sustained all but two.
all but two.
Yeah.
Now, do we know? We don't know yet how many are going to be coming down the pipe this time, but we
Right.
think there's going to be more than a handful.
Yes, there will.
Okay.
Yes, I know there will be.
And I'm not going to ask for anything else
Right.
except that we know there will be more than a handful
Right.
of vetoes coming from the governor's
Right.
office.
By the time this airs, there'll have been 3 vetoes already.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
And they will continue to deliver bills to the governor's office through the summer months and on into the fall so that we can stack them up for veto day to be brought back to either sustain or override, however it happens. Now, then that's it for us for the year. Yes. And it's on to the general election. So we both have primaries coming
Yes.
up.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a primary last time.
Yep.
But we have a primary this time.
Yep.
I'm hoping that we're both going to make it through it. I think we're pretty confident that we're both going to make it through those primaries.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And then we move on to the general election.
Yes.
And we're going to pray for a majority takeover.
Yes, we are.
So that we can actually get the true work of the people done
Right.
in the legislature.
That's right. And it's very important that Republicans regain the majority again, because the governor is the only firewall we have right now, because the Democrats have the majority in the Executive Council, in the Senate, and in the House. And so it's lonely for the governor. But there is a lot of legislation that is going to be vetoed that is a result of a radical agenda that the Democrats brought forward, and we need to make sure that we have a Republican majority. I mean, just think about the businesses. We tried to make sure that the business tax was at least frozen. I mean, I want to see it reduced,
Yes.
but at least frozen. And
we just slid right through that, didn't we?
well, so far.
Yeah.
But that's not over with yet. It won't be over until December, when the audited financial statements are out and you see where the
Right.
cash number is as well. But I want to be able to produce legislation for the business owners that is steady and predictable, so they can plan their future. And when we tried, as you know, unsuccessfully on the 30th to bring legislation forward, and the majority leader stood up and said, no, you don't have to do that, and they're not making any. Business people are making decisions today, and business people today are also faced with the double whammy, because they've had tremendous losses from what has been
right.
experienced from the COVID pandemic. So we have to provide for them some sort of assurance, steady, predictable future, so that they can plan accordingly. And that's just one example.
And they need an avenue that is not going to be overly burdensome on them.
Correct.
Financially.
Right.
Financially, the last thing that I could ever think about doing is, when we're seeing these businesses struggling so hard to come out of this health crisis, and they have all these restrictions that are still upon them,
Right.
and they're doing their best to keep their doors open, the last thing we need to do is give them a tax increase
Right.
on the little money that they already have.
That's correct.
The little money that they're making right now to try to
Right.
dig themselves
That's right.
out of this financial hole that is not their fault.
Right. That's right.
And I see that the majority side really would like to see those tax increases happen.
Oh, of course. Yes, absolutely. And it's, the interesting anomaly is that it seems like every 2 years we're faced with the Democrats want to increase the minimum wage. And you know, they'll use the line of, oh, well, it has to be a livable wage and all of this. I'm in business. I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
You pay based upon the market.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know of any businesses out there right now that aren't paying above minimum wage in an effort to attract good employees.
That's correct.
But you don't have to mandate what they must pay as a minimum.
And you know, I completely agree with that. I sit on the Labor Committee, and all those minimum wage bills
Yep.
come before us.
Yep.
And I've had the opportunity over the past couple of years to actually stand up at the well and talk to those
Right.
Issues in parliamentary inquiry as my training ground.
There you go.
To speak at the well.
Yep.
And I was very fortunate that my Republican our committee leader.
Yes.
There's a word for it.
Ranking member.
Ranking member. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Our Republican ranking member trusted me enough to do several of these parliamentary inquiries
Yep.
on several of these bills. But I agree with the fact that the market should determine where
Right.
those wages should be placed.
Right.
And that after going out and speaking to business owners, not only in my district, but in many other districts that I've visited, they're paying above that, that federal minimum.
Right.
They're paying above what they've wanted to put into mandated law. Let's let our business owners work it out with their employees and
Right.
make that contract with their employees.
Exactly. That's right.
Well, Mr. Leader, we have covered a lot of ground here today.
Yes.
And I am just thrilled to death to have you on this program, and I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm hoping that we didn't go too far into the weeds for the viewers. I usually say if I can understand it, anybody can understand.
Yep.
And so that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because you and I had this conversation previously. I thought it was important to bring out to the viewers so that they can understand the proceedings of the general court. And we sort of touched on the Senate side as well as the House side. But to let everybody know that, you know, we have our rules, we work by our rules, and our rules have determined how these proceedings would develop. And there was no unconstitutionality in any of the proceedings. There might have been in one bill, but I'm going to put that over there to the side.
Right.
But we did what our rules allowed us to do. And we got through our session.
Right.
And we look forward to veto day.
Amen.
Mr. Leader, thank you for being on the
it's
program
my
so
pleasure.
much.
Yes.
I want to have you back here again,
Sure.
and we'll talk about some more things as we get on further through the year.
Be my pleasure.
I'm going to be back, folks, in just a minute with an update from John Spottiswoode, our GOP president here in the town of Pelham. Be right back. And we're back, and we have Mr. John Spottiswoode here from the Pelham GOP, our fearless leader. John,
see you.
what's going on at the GOP these days? It's been a while since we've had a program, so we're just now getting back into things. Tell us what's up.
All right, well, we've stayed busy throughout the whole process. We did a lot of Zoom meetings and stuff like that, so that was good. Made a lot of phone calls. That's always, a good opportunity to reach the voters. So we've been staying busy that way. And we were actually back to having in-person meetings at a limited amount, in space and all that stuff. But starting this Monday, we're going to go back to our normal schedule of in-person meetings. We have a bunch of candidates coming. We have 2 meetings before the primary, this Monday and then August 3rd, I believe, for the first Monday of August. So.
And then the primary is on September the 8th.
Yep. So we're going to get as much in as we can.
So what are some of the activities that are going on around town right now with GOP?
Well, we have been doing a lot of sign waving. If people have maybe driven by and hopefully said nice things to us and waved.
I've been out there once.
Yes, you have.
Yep.
So that's pretty good. We find that to be a very fun and good way to get people involved. You know, they can come out and they can support their candidates, hold a sign if you want. So
you know, I really like those sign waves. We go out there, and there's quite a number of us that are out there for the sign waves. Yep. Lots of signs being held, and we get lots of honks from cars and people giving us thumbs up and people screaming to push on. And it's very, very seldom that anybody comes by with a bad attitude.
Yep.
So I think that we're able to get ourselves out there in front of everyone.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. It's your First Amendment right to do that, and we encourage other people to do it as well. It's fun.
Now, I was able to attend a couple of Zoom meetings with the GOP here in town while we were going through the health crisis.
Yes.
And those seemed to work pretty good. We didn't have a whole lot of participation, mostly just core members, but those seemed to work pretty good. And now we're going back to the in-person. I think we had one that was in person, but we all had to sit at different tables.
Correct. We were limited to 10 in the room.
Is this one going to be indoor or outdoor?
This one we're planning on, weather permitting, we're going to set up some tents outside.
Okay.
So we can have a little bit more room to work with, and we're not all inside gathered together. And you know, then we can at least have more than the 10-person limit.
And when is this GOP meeting happening?
This one is actually this Monday, July 13th, I believe. Yes, 7 p.m.
And we actually bumped that out a week because of the holiday
Yes.
weekend. And then the next one will be on August the
3rd. Monday, August 3rd, 7 p.m.
Okay, so
that'll be our last big push before the primary.
And the primary is going to be a doozy.
Yes.
Yep. So I know that all the candidates, we actually have a Republican primary this year.
We do.
But all the candidates are set and ready to go. So we'll see what happens at the ballot box.
Yep. And we'll be out
will there be door knocking? Will there be anything like that going on? Or how does that happen in coming out of this health crisis?
I think that it's obviously up to people if they want to volunteer to do that. But the campaigns are going back to door knocking. The GOP is door knocking. We'll be doing some locally. If you're comfortable doing it, but at the same time you got to be respectful of the people that you're going to the door. If they don't want you to, then be respectful of that.
And I'm not a person that normally wears a mask for many different reasons. But I think that when I'm out there door knocking this year, I will carry a mask with me so that it can at least be around my neck. If I knock on someone's door and they're alarmed, I can pull my mask up to talk to them.
Correct.
And I think that shows respect to anybody who may be in some type of compromised situation, because there still is a bit of the virus out there.
Sure.
And we all need to be careful.
Yep. And you are entering their property, so you should be respectful of that. We will have masks at our meeting. That was the idea of having it outside as well. We'll probably do it in August as well, and it might be hot, but at least for people that aren't comfortable inside of a closed quarters or inside of a building, we thought outside at least we can spread people out a little bit more, make it a little bit more comfortable. And we will have masks, and we'll be respectful of that as well.
Are there any outdoor events other than our GOP come up? I know that there is a machine gun shoot or something like that. There's a shoot coming up somewhere, right?
The Hillsborough County Republican Committee is doing a machine gun shoot at the Londonderry Fish and Game, July 18th, Saturday, July 18th. That's coming up real quick. And they are doing their annual Lincoln Reagan dinner on July 31st. I believe that's a Saturday. And Senator Tom Cotton will be the guest of honor that night.
The guest of honor that night.
Yep.
I look forward to that event.
Yep. They can be found if anybody's interested, they can go on the Hillsborough County Republican Committee Facebook page and buy tickets if they'd like.
Well, that's always a fun event,
Mm-hmm.
and the food's usually pretty good too.
Yes, it's at Sky. It's closer this year. It's at Sky Meadow Country Club in Nashua.
Oh, nice.
Nice place.
Very nice. That's a nice place.
Yep.
Yeah. So people, July 18th, the Lincoln Reagan dinner at Sky Meadow Country Club.
Correct.
And you can find the information for the event on the Facebook pages for the Hillsborough County Republican Committee.
Correct.
Committee. It's a lot to say. Well, good. John, if there's nothing else that's coming up other than those, we got one more item?
I got one more.
One more, okay.
All right. As far as on a local level, we are doing a fundraiser if people would like to contribute and help to see Republicans get elected in Pelham and Hudson and District 37. This will be a District 37 fundraiser, and we're working with the Hudson GOP. We've combined to put a raffle together, some really neat prizes. There's a like one ticket for $10, 4 tickets for $20, 25 tickets for $100.
Okay.
But we'll have that up posted soon, and we're working on where you can purchase tickets through Anadot online or text.
Nice.
And so
nice.
it'll be set up real soon.
So people can see what the raffle is online and
All kinds of
buy
prizes.
tickets online.
Yep.
Nice.
A lot of
very
gift
nice.
cards for local businesses and stuff like that. So
Really, that's really, really good.
Yep.
You know, in this year when so many people are out of work, we had the highest unemployment we've ever had in the state of New Hampshire, and you know, just thousands and thousands of people filing for unemployment, and businesses that were shut down with no revenue for at least a couple of months, if not more than a couple of months. Sometimes it's hard to get money out of people.
Yep.
But if you want the right people elected, we've got to be able to fund those people so that they can win their office. Yep. And we just appeal to everybody out there to look for this raffle to come out and support locally for Pelham and Hudson for District 37 so that we can back our Republicans.
we'll have it on the Pelham GOP Facebook page, and we'll have tickets for to purchase as well in person.
Awesome. Very good. Well, does that do it?
Yep.
All right. Well, John, thank you for being here.
Always.
And folks, thank you so much. This was our journey back into doing this program after being away for several months for our health crisis. As that winds down and we get back into a normal way of living, this show will be brought back to you every month. We look forward to you watching, and we look forward to bringing it to you. We'll see you later.
We'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to today's program. Each month, we'll bring you new information about legislation that's being proposed in our state capitol. If you'd like to find us or comment on our program, contact us on Facebook at Granite's Edge. We also have a YouTube channel by the same name. Links that were mentioned in our program today will be listed there for your convenience. Tune in next time to Granite's Edge.